to Home and Gift Virtual. We really hope you found this morning's visual merchandising session with Kat McLennan insightful. And now we're joined by a panel with a finger firmly on the design pulse in our exclusive trend talks as we discover what's hot in the season ahead, and more importantly, what that means for you and your creative retail business. Our trend information was curated exclusively for us by trend expert forecaster Louise Healy-Adonis of Flamingo Global. Joining us today is Jessica Staines, founder of The Middle Terrace, Zoe Glencross, designer and founder of Zoe Glencross Designs, and the session is hosted by Kirsty White, director of product innovation at Photobox. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So I will just start presenting and then we can crack on. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We're basically going to explore 3 key trends. So I won't run through all the details on every page as these will be shared with the audience afterwards. But let's kick this off with the indicators for unadorned tactility, which is amazing and lovely colours here. So new takes on ancient craft and methods. Indigo dyeing is still there, marble as well, which we've seen a lot of. Patinas are all really key as well to those surface finishes that you can see on the mood board to the right hand side. A range of blues punctuated with mustard and a little pop of green. Mixed print patterns and textures give the look of distress aged, used modern fawns. Painterly overprinting give it some depth and like actually really lovely in these pictures. And then bronze and copper are key with no embellishment. And if I just go on to the next slide, we've got the colours and materials here, which really show what I was talking about on that previous slide, with some really beautiful stone examples of how you can have those impacts of colour with the more cool grey natural finishes as well. And then we have the typography, which is humanising a classic type. So here we've got the digital age, so we have sans serif, which is a classic, but is slightly more modern. And we're seeing trend brands using bold, high contrast serifs as well, which is really good for storytelling. So guys in the panel, are you seeing this in your work as well?
Shall I go?
Go for it. Go.
Yeah. I mean, the sort of natural elements of this and the textures and the blues is something that we have had actually for a while in my fabric collection, both in terms of we've got 3 different fabric collections. We have a Meadowlands collection, which is very much rural inspired and lots of textured linen, lots of blues running through that. And also we have a Nordic story collection, which is more contemporary and brighter colours. I can come on to that later. But the Elements collection that we have, again, is very much about natural, inspired by the elements. So there's lots and lots of lino carved textural designs that cover both of those collections. So when I design with lino carved hand printed techniques and hand screen printed techniques. And I personally have a thing for blue anyway, which is pure luck. And so, but this thread of blues is consistently coming through, and I just feel that the sort of unadorned aspect of this trend balances really well and reflects really well what's happening for us in those collections, with the natural materials that we use and the natural linens that we use, but also the way that we've executed the designs, because we keep a lot of the designs that I do have little imperfections because they're hand printed originally, so that you automatically get that texture coming through. And I've seen, a real increase in popularity in that type of fabric that we offer. So I think that that design story and the trend coming in is we're already seeing that people are really liking that. And I think also with things as they are at the moment on lockdown, as they have been, and interior space is becoming obviously so much more important, and the colour, particularly for people, I think is becoming so much more important. Blue obviously has this calming, tranquil element to it. So we have, just looked at, we have 6 different blues in our collection, and a lot of them come into this colour palette. So we've got the inky sky and a med, very bright turquoise, and a Riviera blue, which we have here. And the dark blues, she's got wallpaper in this as well. But yeah, this natural story is very evident in what we're seeing. People are liking more and more. And we also have a fabric called Devon Rockpool. So I'm in Devon actually at the moment, which is lovely by the beach. And we have a design that was inspired by a photograph of a rockpool. And that's coming in, and people are really liking that. So I'm already seeing, this is obviously trend forecasting, but we're already seeing people shifting towards that. And I think surrounding yourself with natural materials and things that feel a little bit more reflective of nature is something that I think people have been really drawn to in this period over the last few months.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so interesting what you're saying about that natural imperfections are becoming a lot more sought after, rather than just regimented, perfect patterns. I think customers are becoming a lot more savvy, aren't they, as to wire materials a certain way, and enjoying the quality of that material rather than trying to remove it and make it more sterile.
I think also people are really interested in how things are made more so nowadays. So they're more interested if something begins life as a hand printed design or as a sketch, and then how it then becomes something that they can then buy and use in their home. And I think there's a real upsurge of craft, obviously, isn't there? With people are really interested in craft, and the notion that you can have something in your home that feels a little bit different and a little bit unique. So that step away from digitized design with very solid elements to it has its place and is fantastic. But I think there's this period that we've had, where people have been indoors. I think people are wanting to bring design in that reflects what's outside and nature, and have that sense of texture and I think it's quite a calming, peaceful sort of environment to create. Which I think people really craved in during the lockdown months.
And Jessica, how about you?
I think definitely in terms of, obviously my experience is all from Instagram and looking at what people are doing there. I'm sort of connecting with people who are in like consuming these products, and I think for me it as well stems with obviously like the fast fashion, like the fast interior movement, and how people are looking to bring more natural elements into their home, like you say, in the design, and to sort of get away from the perfect sort of like fast interior industry.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you guys have seen it as well, but I find that people's interiors are being much more eclectic and collected rather than new and polished, mixing materials and like we've seen lots more natural materials in with modern. I think, I think people are, it's growing and curating your home a lot more than just starting afresh every time.
I think you're really right. There's a real sense of self. So as much as trend is key, it's taking on a different form, it feels, and people are wanting to make their own interpretation of trend and feel comfortable with making it their own. And certainly for us, when we look at fabrics, and we've got quite a number of different fabrics that I've deliberately designed to work together in a sort of pattern clashy way. So you could have, you've got over 100 fabrics to choose from, but there's so many colour parallels that you can layer up the fabrics and textures in such different ways that you could have 10 people using the same fabrics in their houses, but the way that they use them, whether it's through upholstery, piping on a cushion, Roman blinds, curtains, you end up with a very different story at the end of it, a very different look. And I really like the way that people have that freedom really to interpret design as it suits them and as they like. And we get a lot of really nice feedback actually from people who show us their pictures and say, oh, look what we've done, and look how different it looks.
Yeah.
With that sense of this and that, and also combining it with old furniture that they have already and not having to buy new, or upcycling furniture. You know, someone I know, her dad, her late father, had a favourite chair. She upholstered his chair in some fabric and has given it a whole new lease of life. So, you know, I think that's really, really nice. People are wanting to personalise their space. So I think people want to know about trend, and want to feel like they've got colours and a sort of sense of trend. But I think there's a real delight in people personalising it as well.
Yeah, that freedom of personalization, that sounds, yeah, definitely. I'm seeing a lot more of that. And I'm sure, Jessica, do you find that a lot on Instagram as well? Now people have such a big source of inspiration.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very easy to become overwhelmed with trends on Instagram. You see like other people furnishing their house with things, but it's nice to see people bringing those elements in with like their own personal like sort of bits that make the house their home. You know what I mean? And it doesn't just become a showroom of new fancy things. And it's been really nice to see that sort of coming over the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, definitely. So shall I move on to our next trend, which is serene warmth, which is, I think, complementary of what we were, the first trend, but I think moves on to that sort of cozier feeling, like we were saying, late afternoon, relaxed, natural theme with touches of glamour. So printed cottons, woven straw, wood, hessian and hemp, natural serenity with warm hued luxe touches of metal, uneven surfaces, textured ceramics, yellow and orange crystal and glass, hand-drawn naive shapes and artifacts. I have to say this is one of my favourites, but I don't think I'd be able to execute this in my home because I like colour a bit too much. But and then if we look at the colours here of the serene warmth, that really sort of autumnal natural colours that are appearing with those really lovely accents of orange and green and pink within there. So pink's still very much around as a trend, it's been around for a while. And then we have the typography. So the 70s and 80s, looking at that colour palette there, started with credits for Stranger Things, very retro with a typeface ITC. And this retro trend goes further than the expected kitschy neon characters. I think you can definitely see here they're moved along from that and a little bit more grown up and resolved than sort of just a neon. And it goes deeper into type, so it's slow and steady and embraces the tight kerning that defines the decade style. And I think everything's come sort of back round again. I think even with the Don't Worry, Be Happy graphic here, it still feels quite contemporary, even with that sort of retro colour palette. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this theme.
I think, yeah, there's a real element of nostalgia here, isn't there? And it is, as you say, it's about comfort. And I think people find comfort and, you know, in these sorts of muted colours really calming and easy to be around. And also, I think if you were to do your interior in this kind of palette, there's an element of longevity, because whilst you might not use all of the colours all at once, you know, you might have a sort of slight preference for more of a pink tone in a room. You know, you've got, there's an element of longevity, and it becomes quite versatile if you introduce patterns that are just small and textural. So for us, for example, we have a design called Mottram Meadow, which is a really tiny herringbone print that I originally screen printed, and where I made some errors in the screen printing, it's very, very textured and uneven, and it's really, really popular. And I think it's got that versatility. You know, you can upholster something in it and know that you're not going to feel out of fashion. And, you know, so little prints like that, and we've got a honeycomb design, again, very small textural print, and that has longevity. So I think, I mean, I love this colour story. I think it's got really lovely comfort and warmth to it. And if you're not big on bright colours and you don't want to have that in your home, it's a great way to enhance, to bring sort of soul to your interior and add some pattern through small textural,
Yeah, definitely.
prints or woven fabrics. And you can also get wallpapers as well that are very just small textural, that reflect a basket weave effect.
Yeah, you don't have to go orange sofa like we've got there. I mean, you do orange cushion or orange accent. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I think that sort of story would appeal to people who really like plains, and you've perhaps only ever decorated with plains and neutrals and greys, and want to perhaps step a little bit into colour, but not be full on bright.
Jessica, do you find that as well with these colours and trends? Like, do you think people are getting a little bit bolder with their choices these days?
I think definitely. I think at first, you see a lot of accounts, bigger accounts that use the beautiful, bright, bold wallpapers, and although you might love them on the screen and want to introduce them in the home, like you said, Zoe, that people can be scared of big, bright colours, and so I've seen a lot of people using like the colours, but in the more neutral tones, like we saw on the previous slide, to sort of still keep in with the sort of popular minimal look at the minute, but add some extra sort of elements in that aren't just, so it doesn't look like a big white room. I think it makes it a bit more personal as well. You see lots of big open spaces, but they don't have that cosy feel. And I think it all, the popularity of Huggy or Hughie or however you pronounce that, that's become such a big thing on the interiors community, and people sort of like changing their way of life to align with that. And I think, again, this sort of all goes back to that, and adding the colour but keeping it as like a cosy space without making it too dark.
Yeah, definitely, like texturing and layering, and you don't, like you were saying, you could have a white space but it can still feel warm and livable in as well.
I think you're right, Jessica. I think particularly if you've done a new build and you've done a very contemporary structure, a lot of if you're doing a big new build like that, I think a lot of the focus in the process is all about the architecture and the structure. But then when it comes to the soft furnishings, I think sometimes people get a bit confused and not sure how to decorate that type of space. And I think this story is a really, really nice way to add some depth to a new, perhaps with big, if you've got big glass doors and big dimensions, it's a good way to add in some interest without detracting from the architecture itself or views and big light.
Yeah, I'm renovating a house at the moment, so I'm taking all this in. I'm learning as well as joining in on this discussion. So should we go on to our last trend, which is quite a contrast: Playful Chromatics. Fun-filled rainbow palette, blocks of colour with bringing modernity and mid-tones and brights. So quickly looking at the indicators here, some really great inspo pictures, empowered, joyful and positive colour palette, fun illustration, block colours, graphic and patterns, bold designs and rainbows of multiples, gender neutral and vibrant, mixed textures and block colours, playing with translucence and also tonality. Neon mint is a key colour for 2020. This looks like the holiday that we won't be having this year. Some really lovely bright colours. And then just looking at the colours and materials really shows that with this contrast in materials that we've seen in the other trends, like a lot of acrylic shapes, a lot of block color, much less tonal, but still those colors complement each other. And then within the typography, you've got many types of designers with an experimental and playful use from, in a way, slightly retro in its like 80s blocks of shapes and bringing those in, but it still feels quite contemporary. Even though it's minimalist, these items have like the effect of a strong font and strong impact as well. They're quite bold without having too much on the page. So, I mean, Jess, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add for this playful chromatics trend.
I think I've seen a lot of this, but what you tend to see with people who follow this sort of style and trend is that they don't just do one room; their whole house will be very similar in that sense, that it will be a wash of different bright colours, and I think people do it so well I'm personally horrific at putting patterns together unless they're like white, beige and grey. Like neutrals are my way forward, but I absolutely admire the way that people use sort of these bright and bold colours that I'd think, oh God, no, you can't put them together. But like you say, they all complement each other really, really well. I've definitely seen a lot of the, that minty colour that was mentioned on the previous slide. Even coming into sort of like the neutral tones that I've been using, but it's definitely becoming a lot more popular on Instagram.
Yeah, you've got to be confident with your choice and application, haven't you? I don't think you can just do like one cushion. I think you've really got to go for it, but you've really got to know your colours. I think to be able to execute this properly without looking too gaudy.
I think it's go hard or go home with this one.
Reminded me with this mint of my bedroom when I was a little girl in the 1980s. I had a peach and mint bedroom. So it was, but that was the mint. That's what I always associate with mint. But it is a really fun colour, and this whole palette is it's really positive, and I think people are, as I said before, have become so much more interested in colour and a little bit braver with colour over the last few months, because it just lifts your mood. And obviously the expert being Sophie Robinson. If you haven't followed her, then if anyone's listening to this and they don't know about Sophie, then go and have a look at Sophie's Instagram feed, because she is the queen of all of this kind of colour, and she can execute it brilliantly. And I think there's a real freedom to the way that Sophie does this kind of palette as well. There aren't strict rules. It's about bringing them together and not neutralising them. So yeah, we have a collection called the Nordic Story that I mentioned before, that is a Nordic-inspired collection. From when I went to Malmö, I went to Sweden and Denmark a few years ago and saw an exhibition that was a paper cut design exhibition where this amazing artist had done these beautiful paper cut designs, which create these silhouette effects. And when you screen print, that is the process, the most basic process of screen printing. So I did a collection, a Nordic inspired collection, and we put a lot of these colours into those fabrics. There's the bright raspberry, there's the blush pink, we've got a cornfield yellow, we've got ocean blue, we haven't got mint, but so those fabrics in our collection happen to work quite well with this sort of palette. What we're finding is actually people are using this palette. Sometimes if they aren't brave enough to do the full pattern colour clash, they might be stepping into starting to use dark blue walls or dark grey walls, or sometimes off black, and then adding colour accents using these sorts of colours. And I think that would be a really nice opportunity for consumers who don't want to go the full Playful Chromatics colour palette and do the whole house in that way. There's ways that you can bring these sorts of colours into your interior through cushions, little by little, through little bits of, an accent chair in a really bright colour, in a dark background, or in a very white background, can look really fun. And this is a great palette for kids' rooms as well, and kids' play spaces.
Definitely.
So yeah, I love this palette, but you've got to know how to use it. But for us going forward, we've got some new designs coming out, and they are going to be more sort of organic and natural in style in terms of the actual design. But we're going to play around with putting some of them into these more contemporary colours and bridge the gap and connect the design stories a little bit and see how that works. So we'll sample
that sounds so interesting. I think it's a real way that customers can and consumers can trust in you as a brand, and the brands that we will be showing as part of this trade show. Is that I think you can be the experts in combining those colours as well. So if a customer's a bit too scared, they can then actually, if you have a fabric that already takes that colour palette together, or a collection that you can see complements, that's sort of where they can start as a building point.
Yeah, we love to talk to customers all the time, and I often get calls and emails from people saying, can you help me with my room, because I love your fabrics, I love what you do, but I'm not sure how to do it. And so we love doing that, and I want to continue to do that. So yeah. But it is, I'm certainly don't feel like an expert. I just know what I like, and I also, you know, I really love, I think lots of us, we love different design stories, and I love neutrals, and I love stripped back Scandi, and I love colour and Sophie Robinson style, you know, so it's just about, you know, you can love lots of different things, but it's just about how you then bring it to your home and make it yours. And I think people sometimes need a little bit of help with that, but once they get started, they then feel more confident to be able to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've seen our 3 trends. So I've got a few discussion points for us now. We've sort of seen everything together. I think it'll be quite good for us to kick off. So looking specifically at trend forecasting, how far ahead are you guys able to make predictions, if you do at all?
It's quite hard for us. Sorry, go on, Jess.
Thank you. I think with Instagram, you'll find that it's very like what's happening right now, and you don't tend to get that sense of what's up and coming. It seems like it's either there or it's not, and everyone has it all at once. Obviously, it depends on who you follow and the accounts and businesses that you interact with. But what I tend to find is that you don't really see it coming until it hits you hard. Especially with sort of the Scandi stuff, and like I said, with the Heidi, like brands like Firm Living, which I used to associate with like bigger sort of furniture. You're seeing people bring those in, just in little elements in their home, and like I say, it goes from all or nothing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think it's hard to use the term prediction for trends.
Yeah.
I think they sort of evolve and come to you rather than too much of a guessing game, especially for those long-term trends that sort of I have that test of time and that sort of come in and go. I mean, marble, there we are. That's been around for a while. Terrazzo is not going around for a little bit longer. And blue, I mean, those deeper blues, I think that's sort of been considered a new neutral for quite a few years now. I know I've designed it and put it on furniture years ago rather than using a black or a grey. So like the paint behind you, Zoe, that's exactly the colour. That was, you know,
This is our Bolin Bird gold and deep ocean wallpaper, and it's in a new pitched roof extension that we did. So it's a really, really light space, but I wasn't quite brave enough to take it all the way around. So I know that feature walls are a bit, but it's the only way that it would work. And I wanted to be brave and do it because it's a holiday house and it goes right up into the pitch. So it really draws your attention to the shape of the pointed roof, which is really nice. But yeah, I agree. I think that blue, as you say, has become almost the new neutral. And there's more and more people who've not yet used it. And then when they do, and they ring me and they say, I've painted my room that colour you recommended, and now we put it with your fabric. And it's really exciting because I think it gives lots of soul to rooms, dark colours like that. And, you know, if you've got, again, a very modern space, you know, they automatically look amazing in old houses. But if you are in a more modern built house, or something from the 70s or 80s, you put a dark colour on the walls, it just gives it soul.
Yeah, and you just from the light those modern places have. Like if they have the bigger windows, the light and the architecture will do the hard work. You're not going to feel imposed by those colours.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually led us really nicely onto our next discussion point, which was how do you keep the balance with trends and your own personal style? Do they influence each other? So I think, Zoe, you might have kind of semi-answered that already. But
with my blue obsession. And I'm wearing blue as well.
Yeah, I didn't realise I've got a blue jump shirt as well.
It's realisation, you know, when you see old ladies you're walking down the road and they're all in one colour, and then they have the green lady. I realise I am going to be the blue lady when I'm older. I'm wearing blue.
The blue rinse yet? You're not there yet, so.
I haven't, not there. Although maybe I'm going to the hairdresser next week. So yeah, I think you've got to go with what you love and what makes you happy. And your interior space is so important now. And yeah, I mean, using dark blues and darker tones as your backdrop doesn't have to create a depressing space. Because it's the way that you accent it with textures that we've looked at, or colours, or a little bit of both. And I think it's so important. I think what's lovely about paint, actually, though, is that you can buy a tin of paint, a really great quality paint like Mylands or something, which is expensive, but it's such great quality that you only need to use a couple of coats instead of 3 or 4, and you can create a totally different room with just paint.
Yeah. You don't need to be too precious, do you, really?
No.
And so how about you, Jessica? Like, personal style versus trend. What's your thought on that?
I say it's definitely hard on Instagram to not be influenced, especially like when you're new and you're starting out. It's so easy to see these like big accounts that are doing amazing things. I think, I want that in my house. And if you're new to interiors like I was when I started a couple of years ago, it's easy to just think, yeah, I'll give that a go, regardless of whether it works with the space or not. So I think it's a hard battle to fight, to not be drawn into the trends. But I think the way I look at it is that I will always have my sort of neutral style, as that is me, and that is how I have to decorate my home to feel comfortable. But I think in order to sort of have my account the way it is and to keep people interested, I have to sort of play a part in these trends and incorporate them somewhere, with trying to keep my true style there. So whether that's just like adding a cushion or bringing it in some way, but it's definitely hard not to think, I love that, I'm going to repaint my full room, rip the carpet up, and you think, no, it was only decorated 6 months ago, calm down.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of like when you're trying to find fashion as a teenager, you have to work through some mistakes before you find your true style. And I was reading an article that it takes up to 2 house moves or twice to decorate a room to really find your style. And I think that's true. I love a bit of pink, but I actually don't have any pink in my house at the moment. I'm just trying, but it's the sort of thing you could use to have a cushion. You don't have to go too crazy, but exactly what you were saying, Zoe, a couple of licks of paint can really change a space, and you don't have to be too precious about it, because even though it might be expensive, the paint, if worse comes to the worst, you can always paint back over it.
Yeah.
I think a really good example as well is sort of I love monochrome, and anywhere I can use that in my home. And maybe a year or so back, the in print was Dalmatian Print. I'm sure you all saw it. And I love that, notebooks, phone cases, everything. And I'd seen, I think it was Lust Living, an account on Instagram, do her office in it, and she'd done a full Dalmatian Print wall, and I was obsessed. And I was only, I think at the time I must have been 20, looked up this wallpaper she'd used, and it was like £500 for a wall. I thought, I can't do that, so I painted it myself. I spent like hours and hours painting this wall, and I was in love with it. But once I got it in the space, I was like, oh no, I feel so uncomfortable. And I think it's weird, because a print on a phone case, and I loved it, but having that full wall of spots, I was like, I don't feel comfortable in my space. But you've got to, like you said, make those mistakes to know what your true style is. So you've got to go along with the trends to sort of get to that point.
Yeah. I think you can definitely trends with like your classic style, can't you? Sorry.
Okay, no, I was just going to say, I think you can be braver in, if you've got a spare room, or in your kids' rooms, and they're willing to do colour, then that's a great way to do it. We've just done my son's room like a really dark emerald green, and then we've used monochromes. We've got a paper leaf print in a coal, like very almost black. So we've got monochrome on the Roman blind and a monochrome rug, and then he's got these festoon lights. So it's colour, but it's also neutralised by the monochrome accessories. So yeah, I think you can be braver with rooms that you're not in all the time.
Yeah,
yeah. But also, I think start with trends. It's also about budget. And there's some great ways to buy cheaper furniture and little accessories and things. IKEA have amazing things sometimes, as you know, and so you can accessorize trend, with and keep up to some extent with trends without having to spend a fortune.
Yeah, I'm a massive charity shop person.
Yeah, I was going to just say, I've seen a lot of people, with sort of like we discussed earlier, with sort of like the rustic style things and things that aren't so perfect. People going to charity shops and finding vases or finding other things and spraying in them and making them their own. Yeah. And it's just a way to keep up with the trend, but not completely blow your budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we did some videos at the beginning of lockdown, when people suddenly first had all their children at home and we were trying to entertain people. So I did some potato printing videos, and we had lots of people that were making little cushions out of things that they potato printed, or little pieces of art that they framed, that they've just done very simply, and they're completely unique, slightly imperfect, well, often really nicely, really perfect, much better than I was doing. There was a real making movement at that time, and I think some people are still continuing to homemade things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And so moving on to our last discussion point is what factors do you help with identifying trends for you? I mean, for me, stuff like this is very useful, going around trade shows, Instagram, I love, going around vintage markets. So as you were saying, charity shops, you might spot a little bargain that inspires something. So what do you guys use to identify trends?
Well, I suppose magazines are still really key, and I love Living, etc. And I'm still a Homes and Gardens fan. But I think trend comes through in different ways as well, through film, and a lot of films and things that we see now on Netflix are very, very stylized in the way that they're shot, and I really notice them now when you start doing photo shoots and you look at how color works together. And so much more film is being executed really cinematographically with beautiful colours that always work so well in the background, and they match with the actors' outfits. And once you start spotting it, you really see it. And I think the speed at which media is now moving means that there's a lot more trend coming from those sorts of medias as well as just in magazines. But yeah, Pinterest and obviously Instagram.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for me, obviously Instagram is my main source, but I do use platforms such as Pinterest, and I still just love to go and buy a magazine. Like you said, Zoe, Living, etc. Love that, and it feels nice to get that monthly subscription through your door with just that little bit of sort of inspiration every month, and that it maybe does differ to what you're seeing every day on your Instagram feed or your Pinterest feed, because they become so what you like.
Yeah, it's your bubble, isn't it? Yeah.
Whereas a magazine, it's just got a complete fresh slate every single month.
Yeah.
So I do always seem to find myself going back to those.
And just how do you use Instagram? If you see things you like, do you tag them in favorites and then have different folders of things to refer back to? Do you screen grab them? Do you Pinterest them? How do you use Instagram? Because there's a lot on there and you can quickly lose what you've seen or forgotten where you've seen it.
So for me, I do sort of use it in a similar way to Pinterest, that I will save everything, and I have little saves for like living room, and even for ideas. Like, I don't have kids at the minute, but I have a board for stuff that of kids' rooms ideas and stuff like that. So stuff like that I keep saved there. But like you said about screenshotting, if it's something like a DIY print, or I've seen a lot of people using polyfiller over lockdown to do artwork with it. So stuff like that I'd screenshot and think I'll go do that tomorrow on the weekend. So I do use it in different ways.
And how about you, Zoe? Do you, like, from if you're going through a magazine or going through, are you a ripper of magazines, taking out pages? Or?
Yeah, sometimes. If I really have an obsession with something, yes, I do. And actually, before I even started designing fabric, I subscribed to Homes and Gardens and Country Homes Interiors, and I was always doing magazine tears. And I think if you've got a project on, for example, as well, if you're moving house, that's when you start to get all your folders out and put all your tears in. And I know Pinterest is a much more modern way of doing it, but sometimes now I will go back through some old magazines that are just still on the bookshelf and have a quick flick through, you know, from 4 or 5 years ago, and suddenly see something that just feels still very current, and something about the scale of a design or something, a colour, it really resonates with me. So I will tear out and I'll stick it on the kitchen worktop for a few days, and I'll then keep walking past it and then think, right, there's something about this that's influencing me, and I want to do it, and so yeah, it becomes something. So I've got lots of bits of magazines scattered around my house. I'd love to say I've got really tidy files with them all in. I haven't.
No,
I've got files, but the main, you know, you've got to. I think when you really connect with something, you kind of need to look at it all the time and think, well, what is it about that I love? Is it the colour? Is it the texture? Is it the scale? Is it the fabric base? You know, because you can love something sometimes but not know why, and you have to sort of unpick it and think, right, well, what is it? Why do I have this thing about that picture?
Definitely. Well, I'm super conscious on time, so I think we covered quite a lot there, which was really interesting. So I know now we're going to go to take some questions from people that have dialed in, so I will stop presenting. Great, and then we're over to Abigail.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. That was super interesting. We've had a number of questions in from our community, but we've actually touched on quite a lot of the questions that we have had in. We've actually covered quite a lot of ground. So I'm actually only going to ask you a couple of questions. So firstly, Jessica, you referenced consumers moving away from fast fashion. Do you think that there's going to be an increased focus on sustainability, and how is that going to affect trends? And that's to everybody.
I think definitely. I think we can already see that coming in like we discussed about going to charity shops and finding bits like that rather than going on to H&M and ordering a new vase from there. And I think as well, you see on Instagram, you see so many people doing the same thing, that it's sort of coming a way that you want something different. And it's a way to get it without spending an absolute fortune from, you know, someone abroad or, you know, something you've seen online. It's a way to make it more personal. I think, like we touched on earlier, about people are so concerned about where things come from now, and sort of the track and how it's made and where it's made and sort of the eco footprint of things, that it's nice to know, and it does make you feel a bit more connected to a brand when you know the process of what it's taken to come to your home.
Yeah, the heritage of it.
Yeah, like I think fast fashion and fast furniture, you know, they have their place. But I think what you're saying is really interesting, because larger brands like H&M, for example, are now having a marketplace where they're actually introducing smaller brands, because people are actually wanting to invest in smaller companies, more sustainable companies, and maybe also support those smaller businesses as well. Having something that's handmade or actually has some authenticity behind it does seem to be now hitting the mainstream a little bit more. So you don't just have to be scouring your Etsy or eBay to try and find those special pieces, just a bit more personal.
Okay, so on to the next one. So will the existing retail trends carry through to next season or next year? And this question's been posed by retailers, so specifically thinking about stock that may have been purchased for the seasons, and obviously, you know, haven't had the same level of footfall, have had to move online. Do you have any thoughts around that?
That's a really difficult question. If only we had a crystal ball to be able to say to people, yes, this is what will happen. I think you need to know your customers, and if you know your customers, then you can tailor the way you're displaying things according to how you feel that people will want to buy. I don't know about obviously bigger retailers, but I think that smaller retailers or independent interior stores have a real opportunity to get to know their customers more, and perhaps, you know, get feedback, find out what it is that people are now looking for, and then tailor that accordingly. I do think that certain trends like dark blues and all these blues, they're continuing, which is great, and I hope they continue. Because we as a brand, we have to, because we traditionally screen print, we have to hold stock, so we have to buy stock up front. So we can't do the fast fashion thing. So yeah, it's quite a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, totally.
But I think people are, or if they're independent retailers, I think people are really wanting to support independent businesses post lockdown, and I think people are wanting to engage and have conversations when they come into a store and have that human contact. So it's a brilliant chance to get feedback from people as to what they would like.
Yeah, absolutely. That leads us quite nicely on actually to the next question is, what is the life cycle of a trend? And I guess we've talked about this a lot, or you guys have talked about this a lot in when you've been talking about the trends, it's how long is a piece of string? There's so many factors involved.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I've worked in retail, I've been a designer as well, and I've sort of been on that consumer side. One thing to bear in mind is that a lot of the time collections and products take up to 18 months to actually reach the market. So you're sort of preempting a trend, but also creating a trend at the same time. And I think it's the same with buyers. You have to trust in your buying, that they aren't buying a flash in the pan trend, because as we were just discussing, customers are much more savvy about that now, and they want to grow and evolve what they're buying. So I think there'll be some things that might be throwaway items that are sort of like accents of colour, but I think the more investment pieces are things that will sort of stand that test of time and do tend to have that longevity within a trend, whether it's a material or a type of product, like drinks trolleys, for example. They're all back, aren't they? So yeah, it's difficult. I guess Jessica, you've probably seen some bits like that on trends as you follow various people. What's your point of view on that?
I think, yeah, definitely it's like I've said, that Instagram is so easy to get caught up in the different trends, and it depends on who you follow, but it's very easy to become, you decorate your house on a whole trend that you've fallen in love with, and then the next week people have moved on to something completely different, and you do get left feeling a bit like, oh, well, I still love this, but trying to keep up with what people are interested in and looking at. As I said, you've just got to incorporate them in ways that don't completely take over your style, but sort of keep it up to date with what's going on the Instagram world.
Well, it's maintaining your authenticity. So that leads me on to the final question nicely, actually. So how do I know with my retail brand what trends to follow, and incorporate it into my existing aesthetic, feeling intentional, but, still being, on trend? Any thoughts on that?
I think you have to do your research. You can't just have it on your plate. You have to go around trade fairs. As Zoe was saying earlier, know your customer. Trends are different for different people. So I think that's the important thing. First of all, is that actually you gather the information and then you can make your own decisions rather than just following blind in one direction.
Yeah, brilliant.
Instagram is great for that, because once you start following someone on Instagram that you really like their style, then obviously Instagram, then when you go into the home bit, it will then suggest other people for you to follow who will be similar. So with all the clever technology that they have, they can see who you like and suggest other accounts. So those are great ways to connect with, with developing a trend style that suits you.
And your look, yeah.
I think ultimately you still have to like the trend that you've seen, you know what I mean? There's no point just following it because you see other people doing it and getting a good response.
Yeah.
It has to align with you and what you love and what you do, because that's why people follow you and that's why people buy your products. So it wouldn't be you if you were just, I've seen that person use that blueprint, I need to use that now, just to sort of up on them. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But we haven't actually mentioned that partners in this. So it's all right if you have a style, but you've obviously got to also balance it with if you have a partner that has a view on a colour or something, Fortunately, my husband doesn't have many opinions on these areas, but when he does, I actually really have to listen, which is quite nice. But yeah, sometimes it's a balance. I mean, I think the worst situation is when you've got a couple and they've got completely different styles and tastes, so then you've got to maybe do one room in one room in another. Yeah,
what about compromise?
Yeah, but it's got to make you feel good, and your space now more than ever has just become so important. So, you know, finding the colours that make you feel good, whether that's through painting a room or through accessorising it with fabrics, and you know, it is so key. And I think people have been really enjoying that actually, and having the time over the last few months to order the fabrics and samples and play around a bit. Yeah.
Well, that brings us to a really, really nice close. So thank you to the wonderful panel for sharing your insight and expertise with us, the Home and Gift virtual community, and to the community, thank you for joining us. Thanks.
Thank you.